page number? 211. And which one?
It was the two of your responses.
So both of them?
Yeah.
Okay. So number one is you attended a large university with approximately 1,500 students. You want to construct a 90% confidence interval within 5% for the proportion of students who favor outlawing country music. How large a sample do you need? What does the problem ask you to find? Sample size. It says how large a sample, which means I am solving for n. Let's go different direction here. We are doing a 90% confidence interval, and it says the word proportion. So let's write out our equation for a one sample proportion interval. What is our equation?
P hat plus or minus z star. And then square root of p times 1 minus p over
Think about what you just said.
p hat,
And why p hat and not p?
because it's from the sample.
And we're trying to estimate p hat, so we don't know, or we're trying to estimate p, so we don't know p hat. And then it's what?
Over square.
Okay, so I am now solving for that piece. I just do, so it says you want to construct a 90% confidence interval estimate within 5%. So what is this talking about?
The margin of error. The margin of error is like, is it just the p hat 1 minus p over it, or is it the z times it?
Okay, so think about when we very first started confidence intervals. I did a dot, 2 dots, and lines. So what of that do you think would be a margin of error? Just the line itself. So my p hat is telling me where I start. How far I go each way is this. And so that's my margin of error. And that's the way I think through it to be able to remember what's what. So this is our margin of error, and we want it to be within 5. So we've got 5%. I can do equals in between, but I kind of changed that at the end. It is a 90%. So what is my z?
1.645.
Now this one gives us absolutely no idea of what p hat is, which we need. What do I do if I have no idea what p hat is?
We use 0.5.
We use 0.5 because it's going to give us the biggest, 0.5 times 0.5 gives us the highest product, which is going to give us the biggest sample size possible out of the different combinations of p hat times 1 minus p hat. So at this point, it's algebra. I'm going to start it out as equal, just like math-wise. It's easier to think about it that way, but I switch at the end. So what's my first thing that I do algebraically here? So I've got 0.05 over 1.645, and I'm going to condense my math here. So now I'm left with that. What's my next step? So now I'm left with 0.5 times 0.5 divided by n. What's my next step? So which gives me n over here, and then I'm going to do what with all this? So then I have 0.5 times 0.5 divided by all of this. What is going to end up being my symbol here? My n has to be at least big enough for this. So even though I use equal in between basically almost like a placeholder, but I just know at the end that my n has to be at least that big. At that point, it's just typing it in to make sure you type it in correctly. But there's a lot of different pieces to that one. Any questions on 1? Alright, so 2, local farmers association, wants to estimate the mean. So I'm doing things like, I see mean, I better circle it, 'cause it's mean, not proportion. I noticed a lot between the first practice exam and the second practice exam, how people started to do better about like catching on to key things like that and circling it, underlining it, which is good. A random sample of 13 1-acre plots, so that's my N, produces the following results. Construct a 95% confidence interval for the mean number of bushels per acre in the entire county. Local association's been advertising that the mean yield per acre is 100 bushels. Do you think it justified in this claim? Why do they give us all of the different 13 numbers?
Because we don't have the standard deviation.
Or the mean. So we're basically typing in our calculator in a what? In a list. And then you're going to one variable stats of that list. Does anybody have written down what the X bar ends up being?
98.0769.
0769.
Yes.
And then we also need S not sigma, and you get what?
4.2123.
3?
Yeah.
Alright, so we get that just out of one variable stats, we'll type in those numbers. The other stuff it gives me is, my N was 13. It gave us a confidence level of 95%, which this one kind of sets you up weird, which you could do either way, but it actually says construct a confidence interval. So what's my equation for confidence interval for this one? And why is it T again?
We don't have a population standard.
I don't have population standard deviation, I have sample standard deviation, so like I'm not going through the 4-step process, but I can if I need to. So then what? So I now have everything I need. I can figure that out. Let's skip straight to, did anybody write down what that gives us?
95.5312 and then 100.6226.
What goes here?
You?
Alright, so it asked me to make a confidence interval, but at the very end, it says the local association has something, do you think it is justified in this claim? Just that last sentence is making us think we're doing a what? A test. How can I run a test from a confidence interval? So their claim is U equals 100. Where does 100 fall? Between our confidence interval, which means that we failed to reject. So it does fall where we would want it to, so we failed to reject. And I can talk through the 4-step part of it. What would I write here?
Since the claim falls between the confidence interval of 95.312 bushels, I think, and then 100.
Right. Bushels per acre, whatever. Yeah. So we failed to reject since the claimed 100 actually does fall within our confidence interval of this to this bushels per acre. And so it's making you make the so like, do you want me to talk through parts of the 4-step, or do you think y'all have that part of it?
So if we see it like that, we just do the conclude of the test. Okay.
And now, technically, I think they would allow you, unless they were super weirdly specific, they would actually allow you to take this and switch it and run the whole thing as a test. Where would I start with this one if I wanted to switch initially? What's the first thing I would use and switch it to something else?
Oh, the confidence level.
And I would be using this as what instead?
Alpha equals 0.05.
And then, so technically, because it gave me all the information, I could have switched it there and done the whole thing, but the way it set you up for this one, it wanted you to do a confidence interval first. But they're a little bit more lenient on the AP exam as far as like, you've done the process right, you've gotten there, unless it explicitly tells you to make a confidence interval. If it wanted you to do it that way, it would usually give you information that would only give you the confidence interval and actually wouldn't allow you to switch it the other way. Otherwise, you could do whatever you want.
Yeah, because I did like the conclude of a test, but then I also kind of said that just without the fail to reject. I just said the claim was justified because.
Okay, here's another thing. I am super, super, super picky and critical to you guys all year on every test we do. But when that translates to now put it all together, the things that I am super picky about with like the wording on the AP exam are not as crucial as it is like on the test. So like if you can come up with the entire gist of everything without some of those tiny details that I'm nitpicky about, you're still gonna be fine. Like I am overcritical on purpose to where if you did everything that I expect, you're fine. If you miss tiny little pieces in between, you probably could still be fine. It's if you miss like giant chunks that we have an issue.
So, on the exam, do we have to actually do the whole 4-step for it? Or is it just?
Okay, yes, but this sounds silly, but if you get to the AP exam and they give you an entire page and they write something up here and it ends with something that tells you, hey, do a confidence interval or hey, do a test, do a 4-step process. Otherwise, it's gonna be like, they give you this, they give you this, they give you this, and all of a sudden you're at the bottom of the page, you have no more room, and it's like, what would be the upper and lower bounds of your confidence interval? And it sounds silly that you're basing it off this, but realize they're allotting you a lot of paper on purpose. Now, sometimes you're gonna get a probability problem to where it gives you like that much room, and your answers are gonna take up like maybe there and you're done because it's probability. But if they ask you to do a test or an interval and you have a lot of paper, they probably want you to force that.
So if they already like give you like a page length of like a question, will it like say that all the conditions have been met and stuff?
Or it would be like super, super specific of like just what is the lower and upper bounds.
Oh, so it's not just gonna be like construct an interval
Right.
and then you won't know.
Yes, so if it tells you if it blank generally tells you to do a confidence interval or do a test, do a 4-step.
Okay.
And we pretty much expect, to some extent, one test, 4-step, and one confidence interval 4-step on the AP exam. But they'll be mixed in with other things and possibly only part of the 4-step, but that's usually what we expect.
So is this all calculated or active? Or is there
There's nothing that's no calculator on that.
So then when it comes down to the free response, do they want us to simplify it to like all the way down? Or we can't just see this where it's like all these numbers being multiplied and at the end of that with simplification.
What do you mean? Like,
When we were doing the first free response question from yesterday, we just left it as n's greater than or equal to 0.5 and 0.5 over all that stuff. We wanted, like they wanted.
this one? No, now I just didn't take the time to type that in. Like you would actually want an answer there.
Maybe it is to the 3 decimal places.
That's one of the things where I'm picky about, they're not gonna care. To be honest, I'm mostly picky about stuff like that so that y'all are consistent and y'all aren't worrying about little details. And when you're checking with somebody else, it's easier to check if we're always consistent, yeah.
So like, you know how like on a test where if we have everything like clearly labeled, then we can just write the equation.
Right, that's all.
So we can do that on the AP exam?
They are big about well labeled, and if you're well labeled, they'll basically substitute anything and throw it your well labeled.
Okay, so would you just like recommend to do it that way then? Okay, and also like, could it be like where they ask us to do part of the 4-step, like do
Yes,
the
yes.
conditions for it?
Yes.
Okay.
And the big point they always make is AP stat tests are graded what they call holistically, which means if there's something on that page that pertains to the problem and you like wrote it up here, it's still on that page, which means you can reference anything. So like with your notation and stuff, like if you want to write it once It doesn't matter if you're writing in part A and then you're writing something in part E. They're looking at that whole page as one. So like your pieces can connect. So don't think about like,
So like if you define terms and
Right.
stuff.
don't
okay.
ever do, so like if it looks like you're gonna have to use something a lot, even if it's something like completely off the wall that we have no idea, like you're like, I don't want to write out, the probability, no, probably that's not a good one. Let's say I'm talking about AP Stat students in sixth period in 2021, and I just wanna go come up here, and this has nothing to do with statistics essentially, and write, I can now use that. So like anytime you wanna shorthand something and I usually always do this, just so to them I'm saying, hey, I'm using this to notate it. But anything, even if it's not like something specific to our class.
So like
I
even
can
if
use
it's
it.
not like a symbol, where it's like for population.
Right, there you go. You're more than welcome to do that. And that one, I like doing that better because I don't wanna keep writing stuff out because I'm wasting my time, but I also don't wanna shorthand, like rush
Leave stuff
myself
out.
and leave stuff out, so like I like stuff like that and they're absolutely fine with that.
Okay, that's good.
Is it fine if, like, they wouldn't be confused at all about if we still write out like state plan?
No. And different teachers teach it differently, so they're gonna see different stuff, but our textbook, which is one of the ones that comes from that, is where it is, so they'll see that a lot. Like, I would recommend doing that.
So like we actually write state plan too.
And they aren't gonna like count off or give it to you, but like they're gonna kind of expect a lot of that. What else? Yeah.
Pretty much.
And I don't care if y'all have questions like general or specific.
I have a question on like, kind of, I think it's either geometric or binomial. It's like probability. Oh, it's binomial, but it's specifically like number 5 from the binomial geometric.
Was that 75 or was that a different page?
I don't remember.
I'm thinking that's not right, because I did 75, number
It's
5.
one of the multiple choice then. In that part.
This morning.
181. Yeah, and definitely probability stuff I want to cover, like even if you just kind of think you have the question. Okay, so you said number 5?
Yeah.
Yes, this is a good question. Okay, so this is page,
I don't
what?
really remember that much about it, so kind of like.
Yes. Okay, so page 182, number 5 is where I am. Let's use,
Do I have time to do the next part?
I want you to start. The
The bottom sheet, yeah.
I want to show y'all the orange sheet. I know you don't have it in front of you, but I'm gonna like pull it up to reference it. Where did I just move the other ones? Oh. And this one, I don't have answer key in there, so just put it on that. Oh wait. This one does have answer key. This one's on the back.
Oh, okay.
I gotta mix that.
Thank you.
Alright, so let me pull up the equation sheet. Um, trying to see it. Where I have it. No, where I have it. I'll Google it. I like referencing stuff directly from there because it's going to be the way you have it to look at. Oh, this is the one from last year, which I don't like. That one gives you too much. They haven't released what it's going to be yet. Um, okay, so on this one, this is your orange sheet. Right here, it gives you this. So let's use this to connect. And like if I'm looking this on the AP exam, I want to use this to help me with the problem that she's asking about. So the top part is my n. Which we know what n is. I usually call this x, but what is that talking about in terms of a binomial problem?
The number of successes.
And what is p in terms of binomial? Probability of success. So this equation is for exactly k number of successes. But the answer key for the one she's asking about has like a whole bunch of them written side by side, which just means what? So like, what would I do if it were, what does that mean?
You'd find the probability that it's below, or that like.
So, okay, so let's look at it this way. What does my k equal for this problem?
Successes. Oh, for this.
7.
Numbers.
Anything below 7, so like 0, 1, 2, 3,
Right.
4, 5, 6.
So I would write out one of these for 0 and plug in 0 every time I saw k. And then I would also write out one for 1, plug in 1 for everything k. And then what would I put mathematically between each one of them?
Plus.
So I would add a bunch of these together. Does that make sense with kind of making that association? Okay, so the problem that she's asking about, all of them have 50 as your n. So that doesn't look like it's an issue at all whatsoever. It also has 0.083 as our first parentheses thing, which is 1 out of 12. And it all has 0.917 as the second one, which is 1 minus that. So that's not something I need to look at. My first one, and I'm going to write it like, so the first one starts at 50, 0, plus, with the whole equation plus, like that. I'm just going to write this number from now on. So that's A. B is 11 through 50. C is 1 minus 0 through 10. D is 1 minus 0 through 9, and E is 0 through 10. So this one says a 12-sided die has faces numbered 1 to 12. Assuming the die is fair, which of the following would give the exact probability of getting at least 10 threes out of 50 rolls? So how do I write that?
X is equal to or equal to or greater than or equal.
All right, so like this is where I usually write out. So what do I circle?
10 above.
So I want the one of these that gives me that, is what it's asking. So this one just gives me 0 to 9. Is that what I want? No. This one just gives me 11 to 50. Is that what I want? No, because 10's missing. This one is saying I don't want 0 to 10. Is that what I want? because of the 10 there. So this is my issue. I should also have 10 here. That's what I don't want. This one says 1 minus 0 to 9. Is that right?
Yep.
So this one is right. This one should have stopped at 9. So this is the connection that the whole problem is about. But talking through this is a good thing to do. Like you can get really confused on stuff that isn't as necessary there. So do you see the connection between using this to write a problem and the way we write it? So you never have to plug numbers in this way, but this is a really good example of how the extent to which you would have to use the equation to answer the problem. So basically, if you saw the multiple choices, when you would have to deal with it.
So when we're trying to find the probability of something given something, is it like the equation or like the probability of something and something over? Or is it like?
Yes, and that was on the equation sheet. This one right there. So that is one that I don't have.
And is it when the probability of A given B equals probability of A, then is it very independent?
So the way I think about it is, I'm going to do the same regardless of what you do. So the probability of what I do is going to be the same always. Here, the probability that what I do, here's the probability of what I do, given that you did something. I don't care what you did, I'm going to be the same, so I need to be what I'm dealing with for both of them. Does that make sense? So whatever's here is the thing that needs to go first, is the way I think about it.
So when they equal each other, then they're independent.
Yes,
Does that also mean that they're mutually exclusive? Or?
not necessarily. If they are mutually exclusive, that means they're independent, but if they're independent, it does not mean they're mutually exclusive. But that always confuses some people, so I usually try to not talk about that much. Oh, what else? Let me